Yesterday saw the start of leg 3, the final offshore leg, and it was the VO65s that got off the line first, with arguably Sailing Poland getting the best. From the middle, they had the chance to tack left, go right, and, well, it was a little bit of a challenge for them because there was a split in the fleet with AkzoNobel Ocean Racing leading Mercury Foundation Racing Team and Childhood One out to the left. Meanwhile, on the right, Sailing Poland decided to head over that way and cover as well as they could Viva Mexico as well as Amber Sail 2, and then Childhood One, who was also coming over for the mix. Plenty of tacks, plenty of crosses, and plenty of place changes up to the windward mark in Alicante Bay. And behind the VO65s, it was the turn of the Imoca 60s. 4 of them pushing the line and getting it right the way down to the wire, crossing it at speed. But behind them, linked out, taking a much more conservative approach and playing the long game. Indeed, the Imoca 60s didn't do the tacks that we saw the VO65s did, as these boats were not really built for this short upwind leg. The VO65s then round the top of the course, hoisting their masthead code zeros, got a chance to blast down with AkzoNobel Ocean Racing Team first around, followed by Mercury Foundation Racing Team. Then Viva Mexico in third place, Childhood One in fourth, and then Sailing Poland, Amber Sail 2, and the Austrian Ocean Race Project following AkzoNobel's line. Well, that was the start in Alicante Bay, and the boats were now facing a real question as to what they were going to do after they round the Tabarca leaving mark. This was the mark to the south of Alicante, and from there you could go north, you could go east, and you pretty much have a 550 nautical mile run and your choice of where to go in the Mediterranean. All through this stop over here in Alicante, we've been asking the sailors and the navigators what their plans were, and everyone were keeping their cards fairly close to their chest. Just before the start, Sailing Poland just talked us through how difficult it was to make that kind of a decision.
Well, I can show the route. It's just working now, so I'm just going to give a few seconds to finish that. But basically, we have got this group of easterly routes down here. Some of them I've been pressing east to see what happens, and some of them not. And then some of the northerly routes. And basically we have the French models and some others preferring the more northerly route. And you got the European and American models preferring the easterly route. How it looks just now with our polar diagrams, which might not be exactly the same as the others.
A good few things to pick apart there. First of all, the European model and the American model. This is something that the navigators will all have their preference on, but these are forecast models, different ways of calculating based on the measurements of pressure systems and the observation of clouds and rain of where the wind is going to be. Different forecasting models will have their fortes. One might be better for the Mediterranean, one might be better for a coastline, one might be better for a big overview. And the navigators will know which ones that they prefer and which ones might have been tailored for the area of water that they're racing in. Then the next thing you mentioned there was polars. And this is the set of instructions or the lists of expected speeds. If you sail your boat in these winds, in these waves, at these angles, this is the speed that you're going to reach. You might sail a little bit faster than that if you're having a really good day. You might sail slower than that if you're a little bit tired or you make some sort of mistake or there's something wrong with your boat. But it's what the computer uses to work out in the forecast that I have with this set of speeds that I know you can do, this is where I plot you'll be. And then the computer can work out exactly where to go. So the routing computers are incredibly powerful. The problem is, what if the forecast's wrong? What if you sail faster than your predicted speed? What if you sail a little bit slower than it? If you do you miss the gain in the weather that the computer is telling you to go to? Even though these navigators have incredibly powerful computer systems, they still have to use their judgment, and it is still an art form trying to put all the pieces together. But once the race got underway, the interesting thing was, for all the bluster that the navigators told us that they didn't know what was going to happen, they still had a very strong sense of what their first moves were going to be. If you don't believe me, listen to Nico Lundven just going round the Tabarca mark.
Yeah, but it was almost our plan to tack straight after mark. We just wanted to wait a bit as we were leading at that mark. We just wanted to wait a bit to see what the other boats were doing, and now we are on starboard just to play a bit along the coast to get the sea breeze this afternoon, and then we'll see tonight what's going to happen.
While the VO65s were deciding which way they were going to go after the Tabarca leaving mark, it was the Imoca 60s that were now round the Alicante leaving mark and having their turn of that downwind reaching blast. And this is where we were all very excited to see what the Imoca 60s could do. They needed to get their big sails out, which Bureau Valet did late. They rounded just in front of Coram, but were slow to get their Code Zero deployed and sheeted on. And you can see the difference in speed. It only took a couple of seconds for Coram to start blasting through the leeward side of Bureau Valet. These two boats now locked into a battle going downwind with 11th Hour Racing Team just ahead of them. And then offshore Team Germany, the boat without foils to be used on this powerful reaching leg, but a team that had made good use of the upwind section. However, it wasn't going to last, and they must have known that. As 11th Hour Racing Team zeroed in on them from behind, the foil started to come onto its own. The wind angle and the amount of breeze, meaning that this is where the Imoca 60s were going to shine. The performance wasn't going to be 1 or 2 knots faster. It was 5, 6 knots quicker to have a foil. It was powering you up, it was rotating you over, resisting the heeling forces, but it was also lifting you up. And certainly 11th Hour Racing Team managed to get fully flying. What was impressive about this is it looked like Charlie Enright was actually on the helm as the boat came into the bottom section of the course just before they dropped. Sailing at those kind of speeds with the boat flying around and managing to keep it on the straight and narrow. Behind them, linked out, also on a really strong angle, and it was Bureau Valet who'd sailed a little high in the moments that started this reach that then meant they had to sail low. So as linked out underneath them were reaching and sailing really fast, Bureau Valet couldn't match. The same was true with Coram. They picked a really nice line and with 2 head sails up, had plenty of power and plenty of lift from those foils. The trouble was, getting down to the bottom, you had to get rid of one of those sails, and it was the big one, the Code Zero. That was there for downwind. So the crew on Coram going forward and electing to get rid of the Code Zero while they're still going downwind, and the boat relatively flat. Much more pleasant and much more doable than trying to get that Code Zero down when the boat was going upwind and cutting through the waves. Getting the Code Zero down meant somebody going forward onto the bowsprit, pulling it down onto the deck, lashing it away, and then a chance to turn around. And you can see the difference in speed and power as these boats lose that Code Zero, turn off that powerful angle, that reaching angle from the wind, and go around the Tabarca mark. Bureau Valet, they had a little bit of distance to catch up from the others, but they were still enjoying themselves and obviously feeling very confident about what they could do. Once the fleet got round the bottom of the course, for both the VO65s and the Imoca 60s, there was a big split, with Sailing Poland and the Austrian Ocean Race project heading out to the east with 3 of the Imoca 60s, and then to the north, 2 Imoca 60s and 5 of the VO65s, trying to get the best of the afternoon sea breeze as Childhood 1 was in the mix.
So it's quite interesting, we have a bit of a split in the fleet again after the first mark already, because then Poland and the Austrian team already chose to go offshore, while the rest of us are going inshore. So we'll just have to see how this one plays out for us. For now, happy on our strategy to keep going, and we'll see what it brings us.
So this was the start of the difference of opinion, not least with the navigators, but also the different types of boats and the way that they might need to be sailed. Were you going to take arguably a quick gain by going back inshore and holding onto the sea breeze, or were you going to go out to the east and set yourself up for a longer advantage in 24 hours, maybe 48 hours time? For the VO65s, it was an incredibly tight battle indeed. They were neck and neck, and in fact, from the onboard cameras, we could see that they were within just a few boat lengths of each other. Everybody sailing up just to the south of the island of Benidorm, trying to use that sea breeze. Problem is, that was very close to the coast. So they were all having to push in pretty tight indeed. For AkzoNobel Ocean Racing, it meant sailing right into the shore, and in fact, having to bear away at times to avoid the fishing pots just to keep their line clear. They led this group, and they were leading it from working pretty hard. That windward stack of sails had to be moved forward and backwards every time the wind would increase and decrease. A lot of hard work for this team at the start of what's going to be a very difficult leg. With the VO65s having hung onto the coast and got the best of the sea breeze, it was now time to tack back out with Childhood 1 leading the way.
But yeah, super exciting. It's going to be good for the spectators at home. Who's going to be right in the end, you know? It's a navigator's game for the upcoming 2 days.
So for the VO65s that had gone north, they must have been fairly confident because there were so many of their friends there with them. But for the IMOCA 60s in that northerly group, it was a little bit of a different feeling. Coram, a latest generation boat, certainly one of the more radical designs, their only company was Offshore Team Germany, who were a very different boat, and so you would have thought would be routing themselves to Genoa in a very different way. Either way, Seb Jost, the navigator on board, was keeping a very close eye on the German team.
Team Germany, c'est un bateau ancienne génération avec des dérives très droites, donc ils sont assez polyvalentes pour faire du spray, et nous on est donc un bateau à feuilles, et là on voit la différence. C'est un petit peu plus de cap, enfin beaucoup plus de cap pour la même vitesse. Okay. Donc avantage Team Germany.
The group close inshore, now tacking out to the right, and the fleet coming together, fanning out to the north and the south as the wind went light and the sun went down. And Axon Abel finding themselves with a little bit of a problem. Their furling unit for their masthead code 0 jamming up with the bearings getting seized. This meant that the tacks that they were expecting to do over the next few hours were going to need a drop of the masthead code 0, and we saw Childhood 1 face the same problem coming into the finish. Not under so much pressure, they were able to strip the furling unit, replace it, and get back underway with the boat operating at full power. To the south of them, Linked Out led the IMOCA 60s, with Sailing Poland, Merpuri Foundation Racing Team, and Amber Sail 2 fighting in the VO65s as 11th Hour Racing positioned themselves far to the south.
On est en train de faire du pré en bâbord à mur et de se diriger plein est. On a la Sardaigne en face de nous, donc c'est pas la bonne direction pour aller à Genoa. Mais voilà, on essaie de rester dans un flux de nord-nord-est qui va nous permettre de contourner a priori un axe de dorsale un peu plus dans l'est, qui serait un peu plus vanté. Donc pour l'instant on est un peu comme ça sous la flotte. Il y avait des gens qui ont fait la baie d'Alicante pour se servir du thermique dans la journée avec de la droite. Là ils ont rechopé du vent dans la bonne direction. Et pour l'instant ils ont du vent et ils vont vite. Voilà. Maintenant la question est, est-ce que ça va durer longtemps pour eux? Je pense qu'on a été un peu plus prudent sur le long terme dans notre choix de début de course. Et j'espère que ça sera le bon choix.
A big tactical game for all the boats now sailing out to the east. Coram feeling confident over the VO65s, but out of touch of this group and with a big question mark, what was happening on board Offshore Team Germany and Childhood 1 to the north?
So far we've gone pretty well. We have a lot less wind than those guys, but they still need to cross sort of the light wind area as well to come up north. They're trying to now. Hopefully long term the wind is gonna come. It's gonna go all the way from the south and then up to the west, northwest, and that could bring us some nice wind, VMG down to Genoa. It's all very thin. It's all the weather forecasts are very thin. There's a lot of differences between them. So it's a little bit of fingers crossed, but we're here, the fleet is there, and we need to make the best out of it.
So while Simeon Team Point and Childhood 1 tried to make the best out of their situation that had put them in the lead but also into that light wind bubble, Offshore Team Germany pushed to the north to try and avoid the same hole. Merpuri Foundation Racing Team led the VO65s, and then to the south it was the 4 IMOCA 60s. Linked Out was in the lead, but not by much, and around about midday the 4 of them decided to start making their way north, and Thomas Rian, the skipper of Linked Out, wasn't too confident about what was in store.
On n'a vraiment pas beaucoup de vent en ce moment et ça va être compliqué de trouver le bon chemin pour rejoindre Gênes. Mais on essaye d'être appliqué, d'avancer avec ce qu'on a.
Linked Out continuing to lead the Imoca 60s and Sailing Poland taking the lead in the VO 65s. But it's light, it's certainly incredibly hot, and for all the sailors, while it's not physically testing, it's certainly draining so far. Plenty of movement across the fleet, and with Sailing Poland now leading the VO 65s around the south of the island, trying to use a little bit of sea breeze that they've got at the moment, they'll be confident of holding that for at least the next few hours. To the north of them, the big question is how long is Simeon Team Point and Childhood 1 going to be stuck in that light wind bubble? Offshore Team Germany pushing out to the north, is that going to work well for them? Because they're a long way from the rest of the Imoca 60s who are finally coming in from the south. A lot of questions, and we're going to have to wait to see what the next hour or even days are going to bring. This wind is not going to stabilise until we really start zeroing in on the Italian coastline. Keep your eyes glued to the tracker, and we're going to bring you all the latest updates as they unfold. And in the meanwhile, we're going to leave you with everything we couldn't fit in today.